Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about two of the spiciest, flavors of the Ford Bronco. We're talking Everglades and Raptor. If you want to go through the desert or through basically underwater, these are the two versions of the Bronco that you probably want. With that, I'm going to bring in senior editor for all things consumer-oriented. That's Jeremy Korzeniewski. What is up, man?
Just living the dream down here in Columbus, Ohio, dodging the thunderstorms.
My grass got a little bit greener. I'm happy for that. I think I'm going to take the Volkswagen Taos and go get a few bags of wood chips later in the day. We'll see. Store closes at 5. Better get this podcast going, I guess. With that, I'll bring in road test editor Zach Palmer. What's up, dude?
Oh, just been diagnosing some air conditioning problems on my car. Same as Jeremy, I know, actually. We're sort of living the same life this week. Old 90s cars with air conditioning problems. Yeehaw.
Potentially more to come on that. Foreshadowing, huh?
Yeah.
Foreshadowing. Okay. All right. All right. So that's what we're going to talk about for a good chunk of this show. We will spend your money. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Get your questions into us. We love to spend your money or answer any other questions you might have. Of course, any feedback you have about the show. We had a feature that went up right around the 4th of July. In case you missed it, check it out. It's the cars we own. We're going to talk about those. Hopefully they're all functioning. They're not, as you may have heard. And a little bit of news going on. A couple of cars are going to the automotive afterlife. We will talk about that. Also, check out our site if you're interested in voting in the newest Autoblog Blipshift collaboration. We've done Autoblog t-shirts with Blipshift in the past. They're a great partner. If you want to vote and say, hey, how do you want the shirt to look? Get in there, cast the poll. You just click on it. It takes you right through to Twitter. The one that gets the most votes, that's the one we're going to make. And then you can go ahead and buy it. So if you have any suggestions, jump in the comments, colors, things like that. With that, let's talk Bronco, though. I'm going to start with you, Zach. You drove it slightly more recently, although what a cool, roughly month, 6 weeks. You guys both drove some of the real tips of the spear of the Bronco range. You drove it on Drummond Island, maybe through Drummond Island, because it really looked like you had quite some intense gear here or gear there for it. And it's pretty wild. Drummond Island, for those of you that don't know, is in the easternmost part of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. You're basically in Canada. I have done fishing charters out there. You are out there. You are farther north than a huge part of Canada. It's funny, they went to about as far north in the continental United States as you could go to test a vehicle named the Everglades. But I dare say you went over tougher terrain. And I've been to the Everglades, just no gators.
Yeah, no, your comment about it being very close to Canada is very true. When I got up there, my phone pinged me, says, welcome to Canada. Here are your international data rates. So yes, okay. You are out there in the absolute middle of nowhere. And yeah, honestly, this was an amazing place to test a Bronco called Everglades because most of the time I was probably in water more than I was on land, which was really cool. Drummond Island is full of a lot of really, really neat off-road bogs, creeks, rivers, and whatnot that you can wade through. And that is basically what I spent my entire day doing up there. We drove one Bronco there, hopped in the Bronco Everglades, did about 8 hours of off-roading, which, wow. Okay. Yeah, that is a lot of off-roading. It was a long day. We woke up around 5 a.m. and did not get back until around 6:30, 7 p.m. So, yes, long day of off-roading. But yeah, the Everglades is definitely the best Bronco to try and do this sort of off-roading with. You have a higher fording depth than any other Bronco. That is due to it having the big old snorkel, and they also raise the vents for a number of underbody vitals. So you end up with a 36.4 inch wading depth that is better than even the Wrangler Extreme Recon's depth of 33.6 inches. You think maybe an inch there. It isn't that impressive, but this is a 3+ inch advantage you have here with the Everglades, and it certainly felt like I might have needed it at times. when you feel that water start to lap up, like halfway up door handles, slapping up against the floor panels, it's pretty deep stuff. And Ford knew that we were going to be going through that. They actually gave us waders for the whole day, just in case we get stuck in water up to our waist. Because it was pretty high out there. But I mean, over the day, I just pretty much gained more and more confidence with this thing as I was going. It's that sort of like slow plodding sort of off-roading where we didn't really get above 10 miles per hour most of the day, just weaving your way through rocks and very tight trees. It was pretty much the opposite of what I assumed Jeremy was doing with the Bronco Raptor, hitting high speeds, jumping around in the desert. This Bronco Everglades is definitely not for that. But if you're doing off-roading in the Midwest, East, that sort of region, I think that this is a really, really cool option for that. And it has, the sweet Everglades look too. It has that neat little graphic on the side. So you get a little appearance cred in addition to the extra capability. And I guess the last thing I should mention, yes, it does have a winch. And before you guys ask, yes, we did use it on multiple occasions. Once to scale up a big rock scale, and another time when, some of us just sent it a little too hard through a bog and got it stuck. But you're not off-roading hard enough if you don't get stuck. Am I right?
Jeremy, what did you do with the Bronco Raptor?
Okay, so Zach drove the Bronco Amphicar edition for wading through the water. I drove the Bronco Aerocar edition for soaring over the obstacles. Bronco Raptor is like the off-road desert rock crawling Raptor. As Zach said, if you live in the Midwest and you're or a coastal area and you're wading through swamps with your off-road machine, the Everglades package might be the one that you will want to look at. If you live in the desert areas or inland where there's not a whole lot of water, the Bronco Raptor probably is your off-road Bronco of choice. Like the Everglades, it builds upon the already capable Bronco platform with a bigger engine, twin turbo. I think it's 418 horsepower, 440 pound-feet of torque, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. Not quite as much as something like a Wrangler 392, but it is the most powerful Bronco available. It is lifted quite a bit over a standard Bronco, gives you 13 inches of ground clearance, a little bit greater than 13 inches actually. The entire underside is covered in thick steel skid plates, which isn't a given on off-road models. Looking at you, Toyota, who uses aluminum and even composite skid plates, even on some of their TRD Pro off-roaders. But everything's big and beefy on a Bronco Raptor. But the number one thing that you can tell that this is not a normal Bronco when you walk up to the Raptor is the width. It is about 9 inches wider than the regular Bronco. Even the like a Bronco with a Sasquatch package, this has a much larger track width, necessary for bombing over the kind of terrain that the thing is designed for. They need a very stable platform to be able to go through the whoops and the off-camber off-roading that you do in the desert at speed. And that's the number one thing of the Bronco Raptor is speed. It's capable of hitting just absolutely ridiculous obstacles without missing a beat. No need to slow down. No need to worry about breaking it. I think I wrote in the piece in our article on Autoblog, at some point someone's going to break one of these, but they had to be doing something really harebrained and driving in a very ham-fisted way to do it. Because we drove these things at 70 miles an hour off-road. I personally hit a jump at about 60. landed on all four, and you can see photos and videos of those jumps that we did out in Johnson Valley, California, which is outside of Palm Springs. Yeah, someone's going to eventually break one, but that's their own fault. It's no fault of the vehicle. It's highly capable, even more so than F-150 Raptors that I've driven, more so than Ram TRXs, Gladiator Mojaves. Just the feeling of invincibility that the Bronco Raptor gives you is extremely impressive. Last thing I'll mention is it's not just for high speed off-roading. It's also for extremely low speed rock crawling. Has rock crawling modes. Like I said, a great deal of ground clearance and more articulation, more suspension articulation than any other Bronco as well. We went up definitely the most difficult rock crawling courses that I've ever done on a press trip. And, I've done all the Jeep trips. I've done all the Land Rover trips. It shows you how confident Ford is in the Bronco Raptor's ability. Now, I will mention that the rock crawling Raptors that we used did have the side steps removed, which leaves a standard set of rock sliders, which are the big off-road bars that protect the vehicle's rocker panels underneath. And yes, we did scrape those, as Zach so eloquently put it. If you don't scrape your skid plates and rocker panels on the rocks, then you're not trying hard enough. You're not in heavy enough terrain to put the vehicle to test. And it also, like other Broncos, has the trail turning where you can lock the inside rear wheel. Allows you to kind of pivot on a tight axis for particularly tight driving. And that leads me to the one potential downside to the Bronco Raptor, that width. There are certain trails that I've been on, certain obstacles that a Bronco Raptor would have a really difficult time just fitting through, the same way that a lot of full-size pickup trucks have a hard time fitting through obstacles. A stock Wrangler or a stock Bronco will kind of slither right through with a little bit of clearance on either side, or a Tacoma maybe. You get something like a F-150 Raptor or a Ram TRX, or now this Bronco Raptor, and the sheer width of it is a little bit of a liability in very tight and technical off-road conditions. Barring that, and also barring swamps like Zach did with the Everglades, the Bronco Raptor is the most capable off-road off-road Bronco that Ford builds.
So I'm curious. We've mentioned just how sort of niche these are for both you guys.
Mm-hmm.
How many do you think of the general Bronco population? What is it, maybe 5% for each of these? Probably even less. Did Ford say how many they think they're going to sell? We'll start with you, JK.
Ford is not talking. All they've said is that they're confident they'll sell every one that they can build.
Yeah.
And that prophecy was, self-fulfilling. It was probably sold out before, before our review even ran. It is officially sold out. So if you want one, you'll be waiting another model year. You can place an order, but it won't be for this year.
Sounds good. How about you there, Zach?
The Everglades is actually a weird one in that it's only available to people who had a previously placed order for the Bronco for the 2022 model year. Just like Jeremy, I actually asked Ford, hey, how many do you think are going to be Everglades? And Ford wouldn't really give a number, but they just said they were confident that they could make as many as people wanted. I think it's definitely even more of a niche than the Raptor is. It's only available with a 4-cylinder, only in a 4-door, and only with the 10-speed automatic. So you really have to be a very, very particular buyer to actually want the Everglades. And Ford thinks that they'll have enough.
Sounds good. Both these vehicles I think are super cool. I probably wouldn't own either one of them. I would definitely go with more of a more basic Bronco. And in general, I like the Bronco and its basic trims because I think it offers you some of the things that I like the steel wheels and things like that, and the manual transmission. But both, these are for like when they brought the Bronco back, and they essentially built a business case for it as almost a sub brand, basically, because you do have the Bronco Sport, and then I'm sure Ford would count these as sort of little air quote models of the Bronco lineup. The plan was to sell a bunch of like 4-doors and 2-doors to different like people who just like how they look, to more hard edge enthusiasts. And then you really get into it. And you're like, for the Bronco to like sort of fulfill that mission as a Wrangler fighter, you got to have this sort of like heavy artillery, if you will, in that range to really compete with the Rubicon and the Mojave and some of the other more like really serious, off-roaders that Jeep can make. So any Easter eggs that either of you guys came across in either of these rigs?
There's Easter eggs all over them, actually. That's true of all Broncos, though. One of the cool things that is on the vented hood of the Bronco Raptor, they call out like 1968, 1969, 1971, whatever. They call out every year that a Bronco won its class or the overall victory in the Baja. So that's a cool one that stands out. But I think these aren't Easter eggs, but the cool thing about the Bronco Raptor is the sheer number of modifications that they had to make to the chassis and the suspension underneath. If you just pop your head under and just look at the intricacies of the suspension system. Now, these are not Easter eggs. They're just really cool engineering details. The one that stands out specifically, the Fox shocks, the live valve shocks, are position dependent damping. So they've got these sensors so that the car's computers or the suspension's computers know how much travel you've used and how much travel you have left, so as to adjust the damping. And they look like, when I first saw them, I was like, oh, those don't look strong, but they totally are. There's these like little arms and pivots underneath that attached to the attached to the axles or trailing rods or depending on which corner of the car you're looking at, and then they connect to the frame, and then there's a pivot point in the center, and that's how it knows how much travel is left. Those kinds of engineering details are almost cooler than Easter eggs. Well, they are cooler than Easter eggs to me because they're functional and really neat. But to answer your question, yes, there's a lot of them. The one that stands out, like I said, is the years, the dates on the hood for Baja victories.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
As far as Everglades Easter eggs, Ford didn't point out any on the trip itself. The one intriguing thing that I noted when I was there is that the actual graphic on the side that says Everglades is an actual map of the Florida Everglades, which I think is neat. So you can look on there and probably line that up with a map on your phone or maybe an actual paper map and like, oh, okay, cool, Everglades. Just a random small little thing that's cool.
Nice. Who would you recommend these for? Like we did mention, these are for the most severe, most aggressive off-roaders. I mean, somebody wanted us to spend their money on a Bronco. I mean, would you recommend this for like anybody who is just kind of like sort of in that gray area? Or, I mean, I guess this has got to be like the most like intense off-roader for these. I mean,
I'll go ahead, Zach.
Okay, yeah. So I would think I would recommend the Everglades to somebody who, is sort of thinking about buying a 4-door Bronco and then modifying it a little. Say you want some bigger tires, a winch, snorkel, just sort of like a light build, because this gets you that, but it gets you that with like a Ford-backed engineering process, because you get your winch and you get your snorkel, but Ford actually crash tested the Bronco with that stuff on it to make sure that it still stood up to their regular crash test standards. And they also did some retuning of the sensors for the driver assistance stuff to make sure that all of that still works with your winch and the higher fording depth, just to make sure that everything gels correctly. You won't really get that if you go and buy these parts on the aftermarket and then just stick them on yourself. So you pay
Correct me if I'm wrong too. Go ahead.
I was just
going to say, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the price of the Everglades, I remember reading, maybe is a little bit more than if you were just to buy a Bronco in a similar configuration, but not so much more that you shouldn't just choose that right off. Like if you want a Bronco 4-door 4-cylinder with an automatic, it's almost like, to me, it sounded like a little bit of a no-brainer to upgrade to the Everglades, because you're getting the cool details on it. You're getting the winch, which whether you ever use it or not, a lot of people put those kinds of things on their daily drivers anyway because they're cool. Like there wasn't, price-wise, it seemed like there wasn't a big downside to choosing it.
There isn't. I actually did the math as I was going through my first drive here, and you're paying, if you were to spec a Bronco 4-door Black Diamond the same way as an Everglades without all of the Everglades stuff on it, you're paying essentially $2,500 less than the Everglades. So pay an extra $2,500, you get the winch, the higher fording depth, the snorkel, and there's a few small interior things as well, some green accents. And that really doesn't sound like a bad price to pay for everything you get. So yeah, if you are gonna go with that kind of a build, I think it definitely makes sense to at least consider the Everglades.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The Bronco Raptor is a little bit of a different story. They start just shy of 70 grand. You add the whatever it is, $1,700 for destination, and you're over 70. I would recommend it to absolutely nobody or absolutely everybody. And here's why I say that. No one shy of a King of the Hammers competitor needs to choose a Bronco Raptor over some other high-end Bronco model. With the big, huge 37-inch tires and the extra track width and the drag of the body work and all that, my guess is it's not all that much quicker than any other turbocharged 6-cylinder Bronco. It is more powerful, but it's also pushing just a crazy thing. It might be, it's probably quicker, like 0 to 60, but I bet you it's not in the quarter mile. All things considered. Definitely not quicker than a Wrangler 392 either. However, here's why I would say to everybody, nobody needs it, but everyone can find it fun. So if you've got, the bank account that can pull off a $70,000 fun toy, you are, even in daily driving, you are going to feel benefits from the Bronco Raptor. I drove it on, if any of our readers have ever been near or in Palm Springs, I think it's CA 74, California Highway 74. It goes up the side of a mountain, goes through a whole bunch of little towns like Idlewild, and then back down the other way. It's an extremely curvy road with lots of elevation change. And I'll tell you, the Bronco Raptor was actually a blast to drive, even on those twisty asphalt roads. The old adage, it's fun to drive a slow car fast. This isn't a slow car, but I've done those roads in things like Corvette Stingrays, and I took a Chevy SS on that drive once. And just the fact that Ford felt confident enough to put a bunch of automotive journalists on those kinds of twisty, fun roads in off-road intended vehicle shows you that they didn't leave out on-road fun entirely. Of course, those 37-inch tires with the blocky tread are not going to have huge skid pad grip, but the grip that's there is easily exploitable. The thresholds are relatively low enough that you can actually have fun with it at the kind of speeds you're likely to drive, and it's actually a blast. If I were to drive I've said this in the review, if you were to hand me the keys to a Wrangler all the way up to a 392 and told me to have fun on those roads, I mean, it's fun because the scenery's cool, but it's not a fun vehicle to drive in those kinds of roads. The Raptor is. It's everything is buttoned down. Thresholds low, still a heck of a lot of fun. So nobody needs it. So would I recommend it to anyone? Not really. But if someone comes and they just like, yeah, I've got money to spend, I want to throw it at a fun toy, I'm like, hey, you could do a heck of a lot worse than a Bronco Raptor. It's fun on road and off road. So sure, I mean, if it appeals to you, absolutely buy it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds like you guys both had epic trips. These are chapters in your memoirs, I would think, in your novels at some point. Zach, I saw some of the pictures on Instagram from the different PR folks. Looks like, did you actually get to eat the chef who was making like a beach, not eat the chef? I know it's rough, but
I wasn't going to say a word.
No cannibalism, but it looks like he was preparing stuff like on the beach. That looked pretty cool. Did you get to partake?
It was, yeah. So our lunch stop, we just pulled up to Lake Huron on this sort of rocky, like half the beach was rocky, half of it was sandy, and Ford had one of their Bronco experienced chefs that I guess are probably at some of their big Bronco centers that they have all around the country now. And yeah, he prepared us he prepared us some food right there on the beach over the fire. Really, I mean, it didn't feel like I was roughing it, but we were eating food that was prepared over a campfire and just hanging out there by the water. It was pretty awesome.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Any flavors of life from your adventure there, JK?
Well, not really. We did not have any campsite barbecues, sadly. Can't win them all. I had to say, Zach got the cooler experience out of these trips. We just ate normal food in restaurants and stuff. But hey, one thing that I can say that I did that Zach didn't do is I launched a Bronco at 60 feet or at 60 miles an hour in the air. So he might have submarinered his, and I might have kitty hawked mine. But either way, pretty much a blast.
Sounds pretty good. Sounds good. All right. Well, that's it for the drives section. Pretty epic kickoff to the podcast. Let's run things over to news real quick. We'll keep things a little newsier, if you will. The BMW i3 is ending production. You guys have both driven this car. I'll use that term loosely, correct? I drove it up north and I had to fill up. I think there was an issue with the car we were testing, but I literally had to fill up like twice or something because there was some sort of thing going on. You were probably there, Jeremy.
Yeah,
and it's a fun little car, but yeah, tech of the year.
Tech of the year, yeah, exactly. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Those first generation i3s had the smallest battery pack, and I don't think they had worked out all the kinks necessarily. And they have the range extender like ours has a very small gas tank. I don't remember off the top of my head what it is, but it's very, very small.
It's just over 2 gallons. Just over 2 gallons. Yes.
Like, so you've got 2 milk containers worth of gas. So yeah, you're stopping quite often. It wasn't as bad on the later versions. I've driven all 3 generations of i3 actually. The first generation, which I don't know, I think the battery capacity was in the 60s, between 60 and 70 kilowatt hours. And then they upgraded it with the 94 amp hour, which is when they came out with the S model as well. I want to say that was 2017. I did the first drive on I think it was a 2017 BMW i3S in Portugal, oddly enough, which is not the kind of place I would think we would test a BMW i3, but we did. And then I've driven just in press fleet, the final edition, which I think is 120 amp hour. And every time that additional battery capacity has greatly improved the overall usability of the vehicle. I think the i3 is a really cool used buy. They really have before everything that gets good gas mileage rocketed up in price due to gas prices, they were an especially exceptional bargain. They're up, 30-40% so far in 2022 in the used market. Kind of a bad time for BMW to be killing an electric vehicle, right? Seems like there's more interest in something like an i3 now than there has been in its entire life since 2014 when it debuted. But yeah, I'm sad to see it go. It's such a unique and interesting and cool vehicle.
It is.
Yeah.
It's really been, just this really, really weird oddity, I feel, for such a long time. But at the same time, it's had my favorite interior of like any BMW pretty much since it came out. Just their, very, very open space, recycled materials, just a lot of really weird trim and color combinations has just really entrenched it as like one of these, all-time greats as far as interior design goes. And I feel like it hasn't been since the BMW iX came out that I've liked an interior in any BMW as much as I like this one. And it's funny that you mentioned that it's a good used buy, because my dad actually bought one of these about like a year ago, got the Rex, that first model year. This was pre
14, right?
Pre DC charging. So it does not have the fast charging capability. That was actually an option the first year. Then BMW went and smartly made it standard after. But just really sad to see it go. But what a cool vehicle, and I will definitely miss it.
Yeah, I think the sweet spot is 2017, 2018 right now. We're recording this in July of 2022. 17 was the first year of the 94 amp hour pack, which greatly increased its around town driving range. But even beyond that, the car was pretty steadily improved its entire run. I think this is the last model year, right? The final one.
Yeah.
Once you get up to the biggest battery, the 120 amp hour on the used market, it makes a little bit less sense. You might as well buy one new, because they haven't really dropped far enough in value. But the 17, 18 is actually on my radar as a fuel efficient next vehicle purchase. Get over 100 miles per charge on the 94 amp hour, the 94 amp hour, over 100 miles of range, and you'll get that extra 2 gallons of gasoline to charge up the battery in those rare instances where I am going to drive more than that in a single day. And for all the other time, I've got a big, inefficient, but versatile sport utility.
There you go. That we'll get to that in just a minute. i3. I guess I'm sorry to see it go. I don't know. To me, it's just a trivia question. It was sort of one of the initial parts of BMW's like electrification efforts. I was actually at the launch of the whole I program, if you will. They launched it, I guess it must have been Germany, about 10 years ago. And this is like the tip of it. And then more and more of these things were to come, which did in fact happen. It didn't exactly happen how they said it was going to be. It was going to be almost like a standalone company. There was this thing called like iNext, which I don't know what happened to that. But I mean, you look at some of the other electrics they've rolled out, and this will go down as the vehicle that did start it all. We had the i8, and it was, give them a lot of credit.
A couple points just to conclude this thought process, at least on my end. Some other cool things about the i series and the i3 specifically is it gave BMW a chance to kind of rethink automobile construction in general. And the major structure of the BMW i3 is actually this is really cool carbon fiber, like almost like a monocoque construction method. And then it's got the composite body work on the outside of it. So, rust isn't going to be an issue over time. It's like the entire thing is made out of composite high-end plastics and high-end carbon materials. Which is really, really cool. And the other thing is the spirit of the i3 continues to live on in the Mini brand. The Mini E, the electric Mini, uses basically the same powertrain and battery setup as the i3 does. It's set up quite differently, but the motor makes the same, roughly the same power. It's got basically the same capacity of battery. So I know they're not one-to-one apples to apples vehicles in any way, shape, or form. But like kind of the lessons learned in the i3 are still being applied in the electrified Mini. So, not a total loss, not something that BMW didn't get a lot of research and development dollars out of.
Sounds good. Totally different car here, although not much larger, I suppose. Maybe if it even is, the Hyundai Veloster N. This is one of the hottest of hot hatches that is about to be no more. I always liked the Veloster. That was kind of a fun little thing. It had 3 doors. I guess it still has 3 doors. It is still with us at the moment. But guess they didn't quite find the market for it that they thought. I've been really excited in the last really 10 years. If you're an enthusiast, there has been almost everything for you. Whether it's electric, whether it's high horsepower, whether it's a hot hatch, take your pick. It's out there, right in between these two sort of eras of still late stage ICE versus the leading edge of EVs. And that's where we got things like this. Hyundai was able to find a business case and, they made it. It's fun to drive, for sure. But for me, this wasn't really my car, so I don't shed a lot of tears for it, if you will. But it was pretty competitive, with some of the other things out there. And we always would recommend it if somebody was in the market for something like, well, hey, I'm thinking of a GTI or like a used Mazda Speed 3. We'd say, well, hey, don't forget about this thing. And apparently a lot of people did.
Yeah. The Veloster N is always going to hold some special place in my heart, I feel, just because it was like the first Hyundai N model that we had here, and really was like the first performance car that has really, really hit home for me that Hyundai made. So to see it go is like, all right, so that's sort of like the start of Hyundai N. Leaving the building, but at the same time we have the Elantra N and the Kona N coming, and I'm sort of foreshadowing this because I actually have a Veloster N final drive that I know is going to publish next week. It's weird. I actually drove this car before they announced it was going to be gone, and then in between that and our actual publishing of this story, they went and announced that it was dead. So sort of drove it expecting there to be another model year. I loved driving the thing. It's so much fun. And then boom, all of a sudden, no more Veloster. Though I suppose I probably should have guessed that this was coming because they went and got rid of every other Veloster trim other than the N for this year. So no more place
Zach,
for a cool little 3-door.
You're just getting old. You're getting old when you're driving a car and it gets killed. You've always been relatively the younger guy on staff, but now that's happened to me 3 times at this point. I was driving the Volt when GM kicked out a press release and I was like, whoa, okay, that's it for this. So yeah, now you're getting old, man. Get some gray in that beard. When suddenly you're waxing, nostalgically about cars that you used to drive, I don't know.
That's Jeremy, the thing. How many cars this thing's only 4 years old. It came out in 2019. That's
true. Yeah, that's true. It's a little not fair for you too. How many cars have you killed, Jeremy?
You're the one that stands out. I did the last press drive, the Chevy SS. I even
that's cool.
It. I did the roads, the CA74 roads near Palm Springs and that. And then I did have that car too when it was announced that it had already been announced. It didn't happen while I had it, but I had a press loan for one in the final year. And I was like, man, I'm sorry to see this car go. Such a great sports sedan. Definitely a memorable one. I don't know if I'd have to stop and actually really think about, okay. So going way back, one of the first press loans I ever had was for a Suzuki SX4.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly dating myself by saying I actually had one of those in my working career as a press vehicle.
I think I can one
Um,
up you though, but continue that real quick.
well, so I had an SX4, I had a Grand Vitara, and I had a Suzuki Equator.
Oh yeah, I was going to go down that road. Yep.
Yeah, I actually did a press drive in a Suzuki Equator too, and they tried to tie into their off-road heritage with that. They had like the RMX or RMZ editions or something, which is those are the numbers and letters they use for their motocross bikes. And I'm like, nobody's going to buy that. It's not even a Suzuki, really. It's a Nissan.
Yeah. Which,
but
to your point, that was on sale until very recently. That was the Frontier that just kept going.
it was the Frontier the Frontier that would not die. And yeah, I had all those. I had all three of those as press vehicles. And then the one that really stands out as sad was you got me talking about Suzuki now. What was the Kizashi?
Yes. Definitely.
Everybody at the time on the Autoblog staff loved the Suzuki Kizashi. It felt like it was just the right size. Like, every midsize sedan was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, like the Accord and the Malibu and the Camry, they're all getting bigger. And then here Suzuki comes in with this right size midsize sedan, like the size that the Honda Accord you grew up as a child. It was sized like that, just enough room for 4 adults and just a blast to drive. And then dead, gone. And not just dead, Suzuki completely pulled up stakes and left the entire United States market. So yeah, that stands out as a loss to me. Yeah, that I remember.
That is, I think I can throw down like the trump card here. I had the Pontiac G8 when it was killed. So when you use the word Pontiac, you're really dating yourself because that brand has been gone for a really long time. Also, it was in the Solstice right after it was killed too.
Especially sad to see the Pontiac brand go for me. Just how much history was wrapped up in the Pontiac brand was. That was the saddest one. I know Oldsmobile, that hit home for a lot of people. A lot of people loved Saturn. We were actually just talking in our online Slack conversation on the staff Saturn earlier this morning. But yeah, the one that hit home to me, my family had a great lineup of awesome Pontiacs growing up, starting with a 64 GTO and we had a 70 Trans Am Ram Air 3 that was like my absolute favorite car growing up. And so when they pulled Pontiac, I was a little heartbroken by that. And the G8 was actually a great car.
It was. They're probably worth almost as much today as they were when they were new. Same thing with that Chevy SS you mentioned earlier. Those prices are out of this world right now.
Yeah, totally.
All right. I think we've talked about the epilogue of 2 different cars here. Why don't we talk about cars we own since we're talking about old cars here? In case you missed it, this is something you definitely want to go back, check it out. Cars we own. We updated this. It had been at least a year, maybe 2 since we'd last updated it. There's some interesting things on there. People bought some really interesting kind of quirky things during the pandemic. Check it out. But since you two are here, what did you buy, Jeremy? You mentioned you needed a daily driver that's not an i3. You went in the total opposite direction. What do we have?
Yeah, so we had a Lexus GX 460 SUV, and we decided we were going to sell that when values had skyrocketed. And at the time, at the beginning of the pandemic, gas was really cheap, and efficient vehicles were extremely inexpensive. So we did some math and figured out we could buy something like an i3. And an older, versatile SUV, and kind of come out ahead by getting rid of our modern SUV, the Lexus. So that was the path that we took. I did sell the Lexus. The first vehicle I bought, only because it's the first one that came around, was a 1993 GMC K2500 Suburban. This is the quintessential soccer family mobile that I grew up with in the 1990s. It's the OBS, original body style GMT 400 Suburban. I think it's a timeless look. I don't think it's ever going to look. I mean, it's dated for sure, but it's always going to be an attractive, cool vehicle. I actually found exactly the one that I would want. It's the 454 Chevy big block engine, hooked to a 4L80E automatic transmission, which if you know anything about GM automatics, that's the creme de la creme of 4-speed automatic transmissions made by General Motors. If you go back far enough into the 1960s and 70s, all of their most powerful muscle cars of the era had the Turbo 400 transmission as opposed to the Turbo 350 transmission. The little trivia that probably no one listening cares about, the Turbo 350 turned into the 4L60E transmission. The Turbo 400 turned into the 4L80E transmission, bigger number, and that's because it was capable of handling a lot more power. Everything is upgraded. Everything is heavy duty in it. People still search those transmissions out to make drag racing cars because they're so stout. So it's the one that I wanted. Big block, heavy duty, 8-lug wheels, can tow 10,000 pounds. Now remember, when I bought it, the idea was to replace the one modern SUV with two vehicles, one extremely efficient that I could plug in, and the other would be a long distance tourer, camp mobile, hauling the family around, that kind of thing. And shortly thereafter, pricing of efficient vehicles shot through the roof because gas got more and more expensive. So I'm waiting it out. I'm waiting for the market to kind of correct itself, and when pricing falls back into a what I would consider acceptable range for used vehicles, I'll be adding an EV, potentially an i3. I also have my eye on a Volt, Chevy Volt, as a or a Bolt for that matter, one or the other, as a around town efficient vehicle. But that's to come.
Sounds good. Zach, what have you been buying since we last updated this post?
Well, I personally haven't bought anything. I am still rocking my 2001 Acura Integra GSR. Like Jeremy, I am certainly on the lookout for a couple things, whichever one might wind my way first. But no, I've since added the vehicles of my significant other to our shared garage. So instead of just the Integra, now we have a 1999 Honda Civic Si and a 2019 Mazda 3 hatchback. It is a manual. So we have three small Japanese manual cars in the garage right now. There's a lot of similar things going on, but ultimately looking at maybe selling that Civic, picking up something with more cylinders, maybe something like a Porsche Boxster, an early Boxster S, or maybe just seeing how much 911 we can get away with. I know that 996s might not be the prettiest thing out there, but they sure do drive well. From what I've heard, I've yet to drive one. So that's a possibility. And then just really been on the lookout for like a really weird Toyota RAV4, the first gen manual convertible 4-wheel drive. Sort of a unicorn. I've yet to see one that is up for sale. I've seen some that people brag about owning and have posted about, but nobody wants to part ways with them. So those are sort of things that are on the horizon. But the garage really hasn't changed since we last did the post, which is a sign that things probably should change.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I scrolled through there and I guess I just had assumed you had bought one, but a lot of people have, and it's really quite the list at this point. I think you need to actually go ahead and get something so we can, one, update the story again, try to get some more traffic, and two, you got to join the club, buy something new, right?
I know. You really got to I need to just get more things rolling in and out of the garage because I just had the same car for so long. Just need to get some variety.
You got to keep
in
the
there.
Integra.
That's not going anywhere. Don't worry about that. That's going with me. I mean, I've owned it since I was literally 15 years old, so I cannot get rid of it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel bad right now. Like I describe myself as a green leaner. You know, I lean in the direction of efficiency, and I have like the most inefficient vehicle on staff right now. And it's not that wasn't by design. You know, it's people throw stones at SUVs, and allow me to grab a soapbox here for just a minute. People get real upset at SUVs. The number one thing that you know, like the number one car that got angst from environmentalists was the Hummer H2. I mean, my Suburban is at least as inefficient as the Hummer H2 was. And yet, you know, I park mine in driveways and people walk right past it. You know, a Jeep Grand Wagoneer with the wood siding got 8 or 9 miles per gallon, you know, out of its carbureted V8 engine. Removing the soapbox, somehow I ended up with this gas swilling vehicle. It's not particularly worse than my Lexus GX 460 was. That probably says more about the inefficiency of Toyota's aging SUV platforms in the year 2022 than it does about my 93 Suburban. But yeah, I went from like 17 to 18 miles per gallon out of the Lexus. Or if you're driving around town with the air conditioning on and stopping and all that, our lifetime average in around town driving was 15.6. I get about 13 out of my big block Suburban. So I didn't go that far downward, but still, I don't like that that's my only vehicle right now. So as soon as I can, I'll be rectifying that with a efficient option.
Well then, it is funny. You mentioned you lean green, but you're driving one of the original gas guzzling SUVs that sort of, made people aware of, hey, maybe we need to look at smaller cars. And I almost forgot myself. I have a 1973 Chevelle in there, inherited, if you will. But it's it's in a barn in Saline, awaiting restoration, and we'll see. It's got the 350 V8, 3-speed transmission, fair amount of rust. We'll see. As I wrote in my entry in there, my brother and I briefly considered essentially buying a 74 Laguna Type S3 and swapping in the big block V8 and some of the other cool parts, because I kind of like the look of a Laguna from that era. But the deal fell through. I think the guy who owned the Laguna realized that he was selling a far more valuable Chevelle to be even more chopped up. But, that was my entry. Still have the 06 Charger in there too. If you like Chargers, you should definitely check out Associate Editor Byron Hurd's Future Classic on the Dodge Magnum from the early 2000s. So I think we've hit that pretty hard. Do check that out. Get in the comments. The comments on the What We Own story they're gems. Somebody was reaching out to me about their 1973 GMC Sprint, which is, I totally didn't know about this. GMC did a version of the El Camino. They were just totally rebadged Chevys with GMC logos on them. Couldn't believe that. Talk about footnotes to history. Just because GMC dealers wanted to sell cars apparently in the 70s. So with pickup truck beds. So check that out. And I guess we should spend some money, right?
Let's do it.
All right. Sounds good. All right. This comes from Thorsten. Love the podcast, and I've been listening for a long time. I need help. I have a 2018 Mustang GT with the performance pack. It's convertible. I love it, but I'm ready for something new, even though I only have 24,000 miles on it. Huge fan of four-door performance sedans, so looking for a 21 or 22 BMW M550, so relatively new, brand new, basically, or a Mercedes E53, trying to stay under $85,000. So a Porsche Panamera is going to be slightly out of reach. He loves the Mercedes Inline 6. I agree. I think that engine is a gem, but also loves the twin turbo V8 in the BMW. Agreed. Thoughts? What am I not thinking of? Let's kick things over to you, Jeremy.
So he lists some really great options. It's hard to go wrong with the M550i. It's an awesome performance machine. I would probably choose, I like the interiors of the Mercedes products a little bit better. But if I'm really looking for, leaning for performance more so than luxury, I probably would go BMW. And the M550i is an excellent option. A few things that you didn't mention. I really, really like the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. It is an epically good sports sedan. You can very easily get them in that under $85,000 price range. That won't be a problem if you're, looking at a 2020, 2021 model. I did a little bit of searching around my zip code, and I found some really nice, good examples. Love that car. One of the best handling and driving sedans that I've ever been in. I also noted that you can save a lot of money by choosing something a little like weirder, like something like, say, a Maserati. You could get like you guys can't see this, but we can all see each other. Zach just like put his hands up and step back.
Terrifying.
And that's because Maserati ownership is terrifying. But if you were to spend $45,000 on a Ferrari engined Maserati Quattroporte with the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, yes, things are going to go wrong with it. However, you're working with $40,000 of wiggle room, and I don't think you're going to have 40 grand worth of maintenance and repairs and stuff. And that's a really cool, fun, different kind of car too. Note, I'm not recommending that. It popped into my searches as like that's kind of neat. That's an out there option that you probably haven't thought about. Again, not recommending it. I am, however, recommending the Alfa Romeo. The Giulia Quadrifoglio is just an epically good sports sedan that you should at least take it for a drive. It's not the same experience as an M550i or AMG E-Class. I would argue it's more fun to drive than what the other options you're looking at. And it sounds amazing with that Ferrari built engine. And reliability woes, sure, but within the last couple model years, they have drastically improved in ratings. And now that they've been building them for a little while, they've got a couple model years under their belt. I feel a little bit better about potential Alfa Romeo ownership today than I did when they first came back to the United States. So just something else to consider. Between the options that you've got, I'd go BMW.
All right. Over to you there, Zach.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree with you, Jeremy, on the M550, but I will throw another option out there too. Now it's not new. If that is a requirement, then you might not want to take it, but you might be able to find one that's super low mileage that is pretty much like as new. But a Lexus GSF. They stopped making those after the 2020 model year. So you might be able to find one that's like super, super low miles. It's along the same lines as your BMW M550i or Mercedes E53 AMG. It's a big four-door, lots of space, but it has Lexus's pretty awesome 5-liter naturally aspirated V8. Is it slower than both the Mercedes and BMW? Yes, it is. But I would argue that it sounds better than both, and it certainly has more of an intrigue and rarity factor to me that those ones don't have. Now, if you want something brand new that is just gonna absolutely, you can drive the wheels off of and is probably gonna be even faster than your Mustang, I'd have to go with the M550i. I've driven both the E53 and M550i, and think I'm gonna take the BMW for all-out performance. It's just a little bit better. It's just like a small step below an M5. And you get a little bit more of a comfortable ride with it too. So Lexus GSF, if you're feeling somewhat adventurous, want to stray away from the Germans, but the BMW if you just want to keep it to those two.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I will jump in and do the hat trick for the 550. I really like that car. I like the styling. I like the handling. Interior is fine, but I think BMW does a nice job of doing the sort of the sporty premium thing. The Mercedes E-Class, I think you will love that engine. It's a gem. It certainly is a very complete execution. It feels like a very holistic, luxurious experience from front to back. I think Mercedes styling is just gorgeous right now. So you're not going to go wrong with either one of these, but I would lean towards the 550. So, yeah, and a couple other good options here. You want to go with the Lexus or the Alfa Romeo Giulia. I mean, hey, you can, there's some variety in here. Let me put it that way. So thanks for writing, Thorsten. Thanks for listening, everybody. It's been a fun show hanging out with you guys. That's podcast@autoblog.com for your Spend My Money entries or other questions. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us get the word out. We hope you enjoy the show. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.